Gaza City, Thursday morning. Wide stretches of the city, tattered by years of shelling and violence, begin to stir with a swelling electric anticipation. Word spreads in bursts, from shouts across courtyards, tinny radios, news alerts glowing on battered mobile phones. The impossible, whispered about for months, now floods the air. A ceasefire has finally been reached. Within the battered streets of Khan Yunis, where apartments long since lost their windows blur into the gray dust, men and women emerge. Some come hesitantly, blinking in the cold sunshine, faces lined with disbelief. Others pour from alleyways with laughter that sounds rusty, unused, caught between fear and hope. In the city's bombed central square, a crowd begins to form. Speakers rigged atop shopfronts crackle with the familiar strains of Palestinian music, once forbidden during the fighting for fear of drawing attention, now turned up with abandon. Dabke troops, made up of young adults whose lives have been punctuated by checkpoints and sirens, link arms in loose formation. They stamp and spin, dust rising in clouds around their feet. Housewives in headscarves and men in faded work clothes join them, palms clapping in rhythm. The song is old, echoing across generations, but tonight its meaning feels new. This, at least for now, is the sound of peace. Nearly everywhere, across Rafah, Deir al-Bala, even the battered neighborhoods of Gaza City itself, public squares fill in minutes. Flags, preserved for months in hopeful closets and drawers, are unfurled and waved high. Businesses, shuttered for endless weeks, fling open their doors so suddenly that the hinges groan in protest. On rooftops, adults peel away from the radio to look for distant signs of the future. The columns of smoke, so ever-present, have not returned. This rare moment of exhalation comes after 2 long years of grinding conflict, marked by an attack that shook Israel on an October morning and set the region spiraling into bloodshed. For many in Gaza, the rhythms of war, sirens, crumbling walls, hurried prayers, anxious goodbyes whenever a loved one stepped outside, are all they've known. But today, the language is different. There are hugs between neighbors, tears running down the faces of men who haven't tasted relief in months. It's not only in Gaza that the mood has shifted. In the Israeli town of Sderot, just a handful of kilometers from the Strip's northern edge, a cautious calm pervades. For days, shelters were homes, windows were barricades. Now, as news broadcasts declare ceasefire, shopkeepers edge out from basements to unlock battered cafes. There are no street parties. The griefs are too raw, the memories too close, but there are sighs of relief and silent prayers of gratitude that, for a while at least, the rockets are quiet. The accord, struck in the pre-dawn hours by negotiators shuttling between Cairo hotel rooms and secret locations on the Mediterranean, is both momentous and fragile. It comes after months of indirect talks, with Egyptian mediators working tirelessly, sometimes at risk to themselves, to carve out a path that both Israel and Hamas could accept. The terms, spelled out in careful language, are unprecedented. In the first phase, Israel begins a full military withdrawal from all major population centers in Gaza. Patrols that once thundered down Salah al-Din Road are to pull back to their own territory, watched warily by Gaza's own police, who dare to return to the streets in uniform for the first time in months. International observers, handpicked from neutral nations, arrive in armored convoys to monitor the lines. The eyes of the world, media, and diplomatic turn at once to the Strip's battered border crossings. Will the handover be as peaceful as the paper promises? Perhaps the most emotional pillar of the deal is the prisoner exchange, the long-anticipated swap of Israeli captives for Palestinian prisoners. For families on both sides, many of whom have lived for years in limbo, never knowing the fate of their loved ones, the announcement brings anxious hope. On the edges of the al-Shadi refugee camp, anxious relatives gather, clutching battered photographs, afraid to believe but daring, finally, to hope. The first buses arrive late in the afternoon, trailed by international observers and news cameras. The released prisoners, mostly adults who have spent years, sometimes decades, behind bars, step onto Gaza's soil with tears and laughter, enveloped at once in embraces, then borne away by a sea of joyful hands. The returning Israeli hostages, equally pale and blinking in the light, step into the arms of relatives waiting at military bases. For a brief, aching moment, the divide between liberation and loss softens. Grief and celebration intermingle. Meanwhile, the world reacts, sometimes with incredulity, often with applause. In Paris, European, Arab, and international officials convene in a marble-clad hall, the air thick with the gravity of the moment. Rebuilding Gaza, battered by the unceasing storms of war, is now the agenda. The challenges are immense. Schools, hospitals, and entire neighborhoods must be rebuilt. Governance, too, is up for negotiation. At the head of the table, dignitaries trade cautious greetings and settle into what will be hours, and perhaps months, of negotiation. The old questions linger. Who will oversee reconstruction? How can future conflict be prevented? But today, even the often cynical voices of diplomacy speak of hope. Back in Washington, D.C., President Donald Trump addresses reporters from the White House Rose Garden. The air is crisp, sunlight striking the podium as he reads his prepared speech, occasionally glancing up at the global press corps gathered before him. The remaining hostages, he declares, will likely be released by Monday. He urges the international community to seize this juncture, not merely as a ceasefire, but as the foundation for a broader peace. We have seen too much pain, too much loss. Let this be the start of something different, a sustained effort to ensure a just and lasting peace for Israelis and Palestinians alike. As the sun sets, Gaza's skyline is illuminated not by the orange of artillery fire, but by fireworks cobbled together from whatever remains could be found, an improvised celebration, and a stake in hope. On the main promenade, faces are upturned, eyes searching for a better tomorrow in the bright colors cascading through a sky so long claimed by drones. Across the border in Israel, there are quieter ceremonies. Small candles flicker beside photographs of the dead and missing. Neighbors clasp hands in silence, and many dare, for the first time in months, to step outside without listening for sirens. The pain on both sides is palpable, but tonight there is a shared longing for quiet, a truce, however temporary, from the recurring sorrow. Not everything is resolved, and everyone knows it. There are whispered worries in homes both north and south of the border. Will this peace hold? Will the prisoners released today truly be the last or the first in new cycles of grievance? Armed patrols still hover at the edges of towns, and the border fences remain, at least for now, a cold, metallic reality. But the rhythm of ordinary life, shockingly, begins to return. Markets, silenced for months, open once more. Fisherfolk in the harbor tentatively cast their nets. Coffee vendors hum as they fire up battered brass pots, serving strong, sweet coffee to customers who had forgotten what it sounded like to linger in public. International observers patrolling Gaza's streets are greeted with waves and cautious welcomes. In makeshift assembly halls, Palestinian leaders, civil society activists, and international officials begin the vast work of rebuilding, discussing how to restore utilities, repair schools, and ensure medical supplies find their way past historic bottlenecks. Every conversation, sometimes hopeful, sometimes tense, points toward a single urgent desire, that this tentative peace will not crumble beneath the weight of old grievances. In family homes across the region, television sets flicker with images of celebration from around the world. In Berlin and London, New York and Istanbul, exiled Palestinians and diaspora Jews embrace in cafes and living rooms, calling one another with tearful updates. Did you see? Can you believe it? The feeling for tonight is shared. As midnight approaches, the music in Gaza's squares grows softer, but the streets remain crowded. People are reluctant to return home, fearful that the quiet might not last. But, as a crescent moon climbs above the battered skyline, a new promise settles over the region. Tonight, for the first time in years, the people of Gaza and Israel breathe easier. Tomorrow, the questions, old and new, will return. There will be hard negotiations, doubts, and dangers, as there always are after great trauma. But tonight, in the spaces between old ruins and fresh hope, an exhausted land tastes peace. and for a few rare and precious hours, that is enough.